I'm before you this evening in support of this bill H7753. Who am I, and what brings me here this evening? My name's Brennan, I'm 60 years old. I grew up in, live in, and work in the town of East Greenwich. I'm an internal medicine doctor and have been for 25 years in private practice. My mom and dad had 6 children. I was the youngest of 3 boys. A devout Catholic family, we attended parochial schools. My uncle, my dad's only brother, was a priest, a Monsignor in the Catholic Church. He served in the armed forces of World War II and was the first chaplain to enter the concentration camps with the Liberation Forces. He was a local hero, he was a war hero. The church and their faith were everything to my mom and dad. After high school, I went right to work in a motorcycle shop for a number of years, then on to the fire department in both East Greenwich and North Kingstown. I was the assistant chief of the East Greenwich Fire Department before leaving for medical school in 1988. I've always been active in civic affairs and, like you all, try to give back. I've served on a number of local, statewide, and even international boards and commissions. I'm the past president of the Kent Hospital Medical Staff, the Kent County Medical Society, and a former board member and trustee of Kent Hospital and the Care New England Health System. I'm an advisor to the Office of the Health Insurance Commissioner. I've actually worked somewhat in concert with you folks in the past. I was the first non-attorney to serve as the chairman of the Rhode Island Judicial Nominating Commission. Your work and our work came together by way of the Grand Committee as we selected and appointed a new Chief Justice to our Supreme Court, as well as dozens of other judicial appointees. If this sounds impressive, it's not meant to. In fact, it represents the rambling activities of a young man trying to fill a void and trying to find meaning and purpose in his life. In 1995, while finishing my residency, I came across this newspaper, local newspaper, East Greenwich, or the Rhode Island Pendulum at the time. And it outlined the conviction and jailing of a horrific person, Brennan Smith, a priest in the Catholic Church, a world-class pedophile with a record-setting number of child molestation and rape offenses. He had been assigned to Our Lady of Mercy Church and school, not once, but twice during the time I attended school there. When I found this article, I held it in my hand and I froze. I mentally and I physically froze. I took the newspaper to my garage and I hid it in a box of old files. At 38 years old, a physician took this newspaper to the garage and hid it in a box of files. The child inside of me told me that if I hid this newspaper and no one found it, then bad things must never have happened. And I would be okay. But I wasn't okay. And I had not been okay for a long, long time. Pandora's box was about to open for me. Slowly, Brennan Smith worked his way from my forgotten non-existence up toward the surface to where my adult mind could begin to recall and process what was to follow. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and to all of you in this room, let me tell you all something this evening that I've never said publicly. I was raped and sexually assaulted by Brennan Smith. I began to research him. He was assigned to Our Lady of Mercy between 1965 and 1968. At the time, I was between 8 and 11 years of age. I learned that he had a 30-year history of horrific offenses against children, and in the standard Catholic pattern, he had been moved about from parish to parish, even overseas from Ireland to America as his behaviors were discovered. I found this book about him, Betrayal of Trust, by a British author, Chris Moore. And as I read through it, I honestly thought I was going to turn the page and see my name in print. My past was unfolding right before my eyes. I went to the local public library and searched the archived issues of the local newspaper on microfiche. I was shocked, and I'm still shocked, to learn that upon his departure for inappropriate behavior with children, Our Lady of Mercy parishioners held a buffet dinner in his honor with hundreds in attendance. His perversion was once again hidden from the public eye. Mr. Chairman, I have submitted these documents along with my testimony to your clerk. By this time, I knew I had been molested, yet few of the details had surfaced in my mind. I gathered my facts and recollections and paid a visit to the Providence Diocese. I met there Father Thoreau and notified him that I had been a victim of Brendan Smith. He told me that there was only one other complaint against Brendan Smith. I was to learn that that was an abject and bold-faced lie. In fact, Father Thoreau's brother, also a priest, was a roommate of Brendan Smith at Our Lady of Mercy Church, yet he assured me that his brother knew nothing of the pedophile's activities. My continued shame and mounting anger led me to Attorney Mitchell Garabedian in Boston. Attorney Garabedian, much like Mr. Conley, is an international expert in the prosecution of the church and its pedophile priests. He took my case, and the church readily settled in arbitration. At the time, he strongly suggested, based on his experience, that I should seek professional counseling. It was years later that I heeded his advice and sought out Dr. Hagen Webb. She's here in the room this evening, and you've heard from her. Quite frankly, she saved my life. So let me return to a moment to the part about my childhood and upbringing. It turns out that it was anything but a normal childhood. My devout parents sent me off to Catholic elementary school, as they did my siblings. There, Smith would call from his rectory across the street and have the nuns pull me out of my second or third grade classroom. I would wait in the principal's office until he entered and took me across the hall to the nurse's office, where he would close the door and do what such monsters do to innocent children. Once done, they would return me to the classroom, sworn to silence with the literal fear of God and eternal damnation held over my head. And with this, they expected me to learn, to develop, and to go on and live a normal life. It wasn't normal. I would miss school for prolonged periods with subjective health issues that could not be proven. I was out for 5 weeks with presumed mononucleosis. Once a good student, I began to do very poorly. The nuns kept me back in the fifth grade because, in their words, Jesus wanted it that way. I transferred to public school and began to feel like a normal child, but the past stuck with me. I began drinking alcohol in junior high school. Between junior high school and high school, I was arrested by the police for riding my motorcycle without a driver's license on the highway. Still trying to direct me toward parochial education, my parents negotiated that if I would take the entrance test for Bishop Hendricken High School, that I could have my motorcycle back for the remainder of the summer months. I took the test, and despite my deliberate attempt to fail, I was accepted. I was expelled after 3 days. I used way too much alcohol during high school and in my adolescence. It was not until I joined the fire department that I began to get my life back together. It has been a sober adulthood, a commitment to help others, and an unwillingness to succumb to my traumatic past, along with years of now professional counseling with Dr. Webb, that has kept me from taking the horrible path that so many other child abuse victims find themselves on. So why am I telling you this? Personally, I want nothing, and I need nothing. But it is time for me to add my voice to the call for change and to do what I can to try to help young children at the risk of abuse. It's now clear we are all faced with two societal problems that will not go away. One, pedophilia, and the migration of pedophiles into closed hierarchical societies where they will act. Number two, the inherent risk that those with power have over others and will invariably abuse that power and authority. Pedophilia exists in nature, it always has. A recent scholarly article by Tenenberg et al., which I've submitted with my testimony, published in the Journal of Frontiers of Human Neuroscience, 24 June 2015, reports a general prevalence of pedophilia in society of between 1 and 5%. Within a closed society with a power paradigm such as was mentioned, the Catholic Church, the Boy Scouts, private schools, etc., estimates of prevalence approach 7%. That's not going to go away. With respect to the neuroscience of repressed or delayed memory of the affected child, before realizing that I was a living, breathing example of this, I thought it was hogwash. I thought it was a contrived defense for unworthy litigants seeking financial reward. But I'm here to tell you differently. It was 30 years after the fact before my abuse found its way to my consciousness. It was another 15 years before I had the courage to seek help. Plaintiff litigation in these cases has little or nothing to do with money, as my colleagues have mentioned. Rather, again, it has everything to do with the acceptance that one has been victimized and it's not our fault. Most importantly, it has to do with justice, and that's where you come in. In my case, simply knowing that the church didn't get away with the crime they committed and concealed was my true reward. So as this problem is not going to fix itself, nor will it simply go away, we need to deal with it, and H7753 can help. Who would be the benefactors of its passage? The victims, certainly. Justice on their behalf is omnipotent. Our community, without doubt. We must all work together to protect those that are most vulnerable among us. But most importantly, our children, your grandchildren, all need advocates and protectors. Legislatively, you are the ones that can get this done. I've given some thought to who might oppose this legislative change, and I'm confident you will not hear opposition from the St. George's School or Rocky Hill School, these enlightened institutions that have demonstrated the courage to reach out to the community far and wide when an abuser is identified in their ranks. They ask for victims to come forward and support them. I fully expect, however, that you will hear from the Diocese of Providence, who in their cowardly fashion have been all about hiding the truth, obscuring the facts, and protecting their assets, behaving as would some like criminal organization. For those of us here in support, it's about protecting children. For the diocese, it's about protecting their assets. In closing, please weigh the body of testimony you've heard this evening thoughtfully, as I know you will. In the end, I ask you that you approve this bill and move it to the full House for passage. Conversely, if in your wisdom you choose not to support this bill, I ask you and I implore you to make your decision based on the merits. The influence of secular theology should not and must not supplant the facts, the legislative process, or jurisprudence. For nowhere in the lessons and teachings of Jesus Christ did he ever say that it was okay for men in collars to rape kids. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I thank you for your indulgence, your patience this evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had them.